Hey there, it's Nick Terzo, and this is the Radical Podcast. No, we won't be overthrowing any governments, but we will be learning from radical creatives who rule the world. Welcome back to The Radical. I am Nick Terzo. Not only do I consider this week's guest a friend, but he is by far one of the most talented music curators of the past couple decades. Jason Bentley has created soundscapes that are etched in all of our minds, from his show KCRW's Morning Becomes Eclectic to his work on the Matrix film soundtracks, and my favorite show, Metropolis, which can be heard weekly on KCRW and also streams online. Jason has not only identified the greatest talent in the field of electronic music, but has been integral in establishing it as a music genre. Additionally, Jason is a talented DJ himself, having performed at some of the largest festivals in the world, including Coachella. In this episode, we explore his continued growth from curator to an actual creator. Up next, my conversation with Jason Bentley. Hey, Jason.
Nick Terzo.
Welcome.
How are you, my friend?
I'm well. I'm looking forward to us getting caught up. And I think more importantly, since you're actually a professional at this and I'm just doing it for 3 months, I'm going to learn from you during this very podcast. It's very exciting for me.
Whatever I can impart, especially to you. It's been too long. We were kind of around each other maybe 15 years ago at a record label.
Yeah, it was actually, I hate to tell you, it was 25.
25, okay. All right.
Yes, and we were office neighbors, weren't we?
Yep.
The infamous Maverick.
Yeah, the heady days of the record business when it was flush with cash and very different time. We were slinging CDs at that time.
Indeed. It's a great profit. How long did you do like kind of the A&R job type of stuff, like with Maverick or with anyone else beyond that?
Really after Maverick, I just went into more music supervision, and, radio was a constant throughout that time and continued. So I just did more, consulting for advertising, film, TV shows, as an independent music supervisor. So that was right around 2000.
Right. And did you enjoy like that period of doing A&R, which my sister, by the way, has told me I mentioned that too often on here. And for people that don't know what that is, I've been scolded. So A&R is basically called artists and repertoire. It's what at record labels, they're the people involved with signing artists and actually making the records with them and getting the material right before you record. So that's what that job entails.
I felt like there I was kind of a trophy on the mantelpiece, and it was hard to get a lot done in that environment without singling anyone out. It was sort of a toxic place. At least I was very unhappy at that time. It enabled me to buy a home and put some money in the bank. But, there's this whole side of A&R where, you hear this thing like the A&R weasels, and it speaks to the exploitative side of the record business. And there's a lot of truth to that, but that's not what I signed up for. What I signed up for was, trying to use my love and passion for music and insight to create amazing, timeless projects, and put creative people together and see what happened. And it was just ultimately, it was a lot harder to do that in a political atmosphere, which unfortunately it was too much of that.
Is why I kind of left, right? There was just too much of being in the middle of a tug of war at that time, unfortunately. And, that kind of made me depart. So I understand that completely. While you were there, though, you started doing was that the first time you'd done the music supervision? Because you did the Matrix, right? The soundtracks?
Yeah, the Matrix is easily the biggest takeaway from my Maverick days. But, I was involved in several projects. But it was being at the right place at the right time. I was the guy to go over and meet the Wachowskis initially and check out the film, kind of a rough cut. All they knew at that point was they wanted Rage Against the Machine at the end, and also The Prodigy, which is why they even picked up the phone to Maverick, as we had signed The Prodigy. And so I went out and met him and hit it off, and that turned into a 3-year project that covered 3 separate feature films, an anime release called Animatrix, consulting on video game for it. So it was quite a chunk of my life, and very rewarding, a huge education. And that really sort of set me in motion with music supervision, which is really the career path I took coming out of Maverick.
Look, both of you got, look, they are so beyond, just beyond the world in their creativity. So having you with your knowledge of music and your curation, and I mean, you're kind of top of the game too. So together, I mean, it's kind of a match made in heaven from my point of view.
We did some good things. Sadly, I haven't gotten a call on Matrix 4, so
Uh-oh.
I'm bummed about that. But it's been a long time, and I'm sure they have other resources and relationships that have formed over those years. So it's fine.
Well, and you've been such kind of like, you've been definitely a leader like in the electronic music thing. And I always remember being at Maverick and you being nice enough to be my kind of what would it be, horse whisperer or whatever. You actually took me to the Miami the Winter Dance Music Conference, and
Yeah.
we did that year. And I think it was a Daft Punk. I don't know who else you kind of hooked me in with. There was a bunch of people that year. It was
Yeah,
amazing.
that whole scene that was my youth culture movement. That was my British invasion, my punk rock. That was, I took ownership of that scene, and really became a leader and an advocate, working at various levels, whether it was the Recording Academy or out at festivals, and just trying to advance the understanding and the agenda. When I think back to DJing the first 2 Coachellas 20 years ago, there was such a limited appreciation right across the board, from the promoters to the roadies, people setting up the stage, a limited appreciation of the potential of dance and electronic music. And then, we've come to see over the years the evolution of that, where it's become the dominant genre and the most over the top staging
Yes.
at the festival, hands down. So it's a funny arc of experience, but I've just been there from the start, and it's been a pleasure. I think one of the most attractive things for me is that the nature of that scene is about what's next, what new sound, what new synthesis. It's a future-minded community, and I think that's something that I really love, because I'm always interested in what's next. What's the next stimulus, and how can people put it together? And technology, the promise of technology in music. So it's all represented in that genre, and that's one of the big reasons why I've been such a champion.
Right. And have you look, you have a lot of sides to you, the music supervision you've done, the label stuff. Have you done some producing or some like remixing at all?
Yeah, I've done remixing, producing, and actually this is one of the most exciting things to come out of the pandemic months. Is I've finally in my life just sat down and said, I'm going to teach myself Ableton Live, and I'm going to figure this out, and I'll probably suck at the start, but I'm just going to keep chipping away. And I've done some really good work, and it's taken a lot of time and focus, but I kind of needed the quarantine to get me there. I also, I was always the kind of producer, quote unquote, where I would be maybe more of an executive producer. I'd help to put an opportunity together, and then I'd kind of be on the couch in the back of the studio. I really wouldn't be on the front lines of creating things or recording things. And this experience in recent months put me on the front lines, and that was just so refreshing. But the other part of it is that probably to a fault, I've always been a control freak, and I've needed to be involved in every aspect. Unless it's, if I can't, I'm just not that interested. And I feel like I needed to take the reins of production and writing. I just needed to do it on my own. And there's lots of people, friends with the best intentions, who would say, "Hey, come on over. Let's like just work on some stuff." And I didn't want to do it that way. I wanted to force myself to do it, knowing who I am, the way that I am. I needed to do it on my own and have my ownership and fingerprints. No one else. No one else. And maybe only just like a mastering process. I'll send it out for master.
That's automated nowadays too, by the way.
Yeah. So, I think the last several months in that regard, with writing original music and producing, has been a total revelation.
Good for you. Growth is good, man. Growth is good. So I want to cover, obviously you have a reputation as having, discovered and kind of exposed a lot of new music through your years at KCRW. But we're going to get to that because some of the shows you've done to me are just, people haven't heard them in this country, are just so stellar. And I don't know what to say. They're just brilliant the way they're put together and the way they sound. But what's it like for you? Like, you're an artist too that has to go out and play live in front of large audiences. I mean, do you have a preference? Does it appeal to each side of you as you do those things?
They're just different exercises. Whether it's a studio production, like a radio show, is a very controlled environment, and you don't have that instant feedback of an audience, versus playing at a Coachella or EDC or something like that. It's also a different style of performance. You're playing a different range of music. There are records that are made for the live club environment. Just the sonic range. It's different from radio. And so having a mastery of those different environments, as a radio DJ, you're also more of a storyteller, in terms of a narrative and lyrics and what you're putting together. And you don't really approach it the same way in a nightclub or festival environment. There's still an arc that you're taking people on, this sort of journey, but it's more abstract and it's more feeling instead of thinking. The great thing about radio, and especially with an audience like the KCRW audience, as a public radio audience and NPR audience, they're a smart bunch, and they pay attention. And some of the details, like being able to come out of press conferences, some of the heavy news of the day, and just play a song that says everything you need to say. And I wouldn't have to say a word. It's just that song that I picked. And when you can do that, when you can nail it, and you bring everyone into the moment at the same time, that's powerful stuff. And I think, practicing that discipline on a regular basis was really the dream job. That was the joy of a lifetime. But in retrospect, I did it, and I did it, and I did it to death. I mean, if we look back at actual hours, miles of on-air radio experience, I mean, it is prolific. And so I came to a point where I just felt like I did everything that I could do. And in the fall of last year, I hung up the headphones at KCRW, which was, either really bold or just completely idiotic. It is a great place to be. You're constantly getting to meet and hang out with some of your favorite musicians, and your whole job is to just turn people on to new music. It's so exciting and fun. But again, I just felt like I hit the ceiling and there wasn't anywhere else to go. At the same time, the radio station was at a huge crossroads, because we were evolving out of a wonderful basement studio, which is never meant to be a radio station. It was at Santa Monica College, underneath the cafeteria and the student bookstore. And it was built out over the years as a radio station. Well, maybe 10 years ago, we got funding from the city of Santa Monica to build a new facility, purpose-built. And that was a long process, almost 8 years before we were actually in there. And that came to fruition over the last year. And to me, that was very much kind of writing on the wall to say, it's time for someone else. It's time for a new energy and a new point of view for the sake of this organization. It was just too much of a shift for everybody in this new building. And so it felt like we got there, and it's just like, all right, peace out. You guys got it from here. I feel like we did it, and you've got this dream, state of the art facility. Now go and continue to be awesome. And so that was part of the equation as well.
Well, that's interesting because you're just a basement dweller, I guess. So you build this state of the art thing after dwelling underground for so many years, and you're out.
I think, something about the basement, it was a daily reminder going into this sort of dingy underground studio that had to be built as a studio. It was never created as such. And it was just a reminder every day of this kind of DIY ethos of why you're doing what you're doing and the mission. And it just made sense to me. It gave me purpose. And I think, having the dream facility with state-of-the-art gear, it sort of changed the equation for me, where all of a sudden it felt very clinical and isolated. And it just wasn't this funky, dirty studio thing that we had lived in for 30 years. And so I think for me, there was a need to just call it at that point. I think we had the golden age in the basement, and for me, it'll always be that way.
And for people listening, if you haven't lived in LA, KCRW is based in Santa Monica at Santa Monica Community College. And it's been a remarkably punching above its weight for the size of, you would think, a college radio station or something such that, or public broadcasting. Were you guys streaming, though, where people would have had that available to them in the later part of it, or not so much?
Yeah, we were. I think we were leaders in making stuff available online. In fact, a lot of it caught up to us where in the last 5 years or so is when the publishers and the labels would be much more restrictive. Initially, we would just have everything online, and we would justify it as being part of our responsibility as a public service was to archive all of these performances. And so the archives run deep. It's not that anyone ever really dug in there, but they're there. And it became harder and harder in recent years when, with the emergence of digital as dominant in the media landscape, all of a sudden there were more and more restrictions to what we could offer online, what we could archive.
And people listening should know that Jason hosted show called Morning Becomes Eclectic, which was their morning kind of late drive, right? Drive time, where you exposed a lot of new music. Yeah. An LA drive time.
A lot of people tell me that they would hear me come on, they'd know they were late for work. So.
And then my favorite show you did, which you developed it, right, and created it, was Metropolis, right?
Yeah, and I still do an iteration of Metropolis, which is now Saturday nights on KCRW from 8 to 10 p.m. So, that's my first love. That's a show I started on KCRW in the summer of '92 and have been doing ever since. And that for me is the platform for progressive dance and electronic music.
And people shouldn't be scared of that in any way, because I'll tell you that living in LA and driving home on a Saturday night, maybe after seeing a band or something, the soundscape of that show was so beautiful, and so it didn't rattle your brain like I think people may envision. It wasn't a big booming. It was so calming to me on a Saturday night to listen to that in a car in Los Angeles. It was brilliant.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I'm proud of the artistry that's involved in that. That the mix is really important to me, and I hope people do appreciate what goes into that. It's a performance of progressive sounds, electronic sounds. I'm not really trying to play pop leaning music or songs. It's more about creating a headspace for people to indulge. Um, and I get all of this music submitted to me, and what I'm looking for are the various tools that I can use to create that world. And I've become very good at it in just performing it. I can hear things and process them and put it into its place in the arrangement of the show pretty quickly now, just because I've just done it and done it and done it. Um, so it's in a good place, and I love it, and hope to just keep doing it as long as I can. Now we've recently announced a new schedule where I'm the lead in to the infamous Henry Rollins, who follows me 10 to 12 midnight on Saturday nights now. So I've been joking that I'd always thought I'd find myself a cheap warm up act for Henry Rollins, and it's a reality.
You did it. You did it. So is that outlined for you, the show, though, when you talk about being able to kind of almost do it on the fly and put these things in? Are you have some kind of an outline as you go into it and build the show that week?
Yeah, I get a ton of stuff. As you can imagine, over the years, the various labels and promoters will just send me things, and so I will set aside time during the week to audition things, and I'll just make notes in my mind and arrange it in a folder. So if anything, it's creating a palette, and then challenging myself in real time to make those connections.
Right. And with this fire hose of distribution that we have nowadays, as opposed to when we started this and you had to kind of get to us somehow and get your music in front of us. How's that changed your own discovery process? Like when you're getting hit, with a fire hose of new music.
I still have trusted resources, and you look for those leading indicators, whether it's the label, the publishing company, the manager, the artist directly. And then I kind of ruthlessly delete things too. um, it's funny because as I've started to write my own music and be on the other side of the equation, where I'm putting something forward to colleagues and friends and saying, "Hey, I wrote this. Maybe take a listen." And I just have to remember the way that I am when I get those appeals. I can be so dismissive and just like, yeah, nah, it's not. Um, and I can't, take it personal if I don't hear back from somebody, because that's the way I am. I'm just brutal. If the artist were in the room as I audition things, they would just sit there and go, "What? Wait, what? It took you 10 seconds, and then you tossed it." And it's just the way it is.
And are you most proud as you kind of go into this next chapter, so to speak, of your ability lyrically, your ability kind of is finding the beats or the kind of the groove underneath? What are you most proud of? What you've excelled at since you started doing it for yourself?
Um, I think it's the controlling the ebb and flow. I feel like a lot of DJs are just in one gear, and I feel like I can really take people on a range of emotions, and from starting point, point A to Z. Um, so I like that, and just the mixing, because I think when you're talking about the mix space, when you're playing elements from two tracks or more at the same time, you're spontaneously creating something completely original that hasn't been recorded, that doesn't exist. And there's something I love about that, and also really um, how radio is, so it just disappears into the ether. I kind of like the idea that it's not on demand and not available all the time at a fingertip. Radio. There's something beautiful about it. Just is disposable. It just goes out into the air, and then that's it.
Beautiful. Still works after all these years. Still works. Um, do you find? I mean, is sampling still an issue for that type of music? Or are you like able to kind of really create something from nothing. As I hear a lot of these artists, it just feels like they're pulling from other people's work to some degree. Like, what's the balance of that?
I think it depends on how high the stakes are. If there's money, then attorneys are going to come calling. If there's no economy for it, no one's going to waste their time. Um, so yeah, I mean the issues still apply, but like you say, the sort of the fire hose idea is there's so much media being cut and repurposed and sampled and turned upside down and reworked. You can't possibly get your head around it. I had an interesting experience over the pandemic months where we found out pretty abruptly that we couldn't return to the KCRW studios. It was, COVID was breaking and everyone was panicking. And I just found out on a Thursday before the Saturday show that we were going to switch to a music stream that we have called Eclectic 24 was going to take over the broadcast side as while we figured everything out. So with that information, I just pivoted to Instagram Live. I really didn't, I'd never used it before. I didn't know what to expect, but I thought to myself, I need to reach my audience with the music. Personally, I just need to express myself. So I'm going to just try it. And so it ended up being this 6.5-month experiment in live streaming a radio show. And because that's how long it took to return to the KCRW studios, they're still not in full, order over there. It's still in a skeletal staff. But the things that came out of that experience, the digital community that formed organically to be there and watch me DJ on Instagram, the things that I would do to make that more interesting, like I bought a smoke machine and I have a neon light and had lasers and, without it being like ridiculous and stupid. But the most important thing for me was still the performance of the mix. But I really loved seeing this live stream chat room community that formed out of nowhere. People coming in from all over the world saying, I'm listening from England and I'm listening from Melbourne, Australia. It was so cool. But the reason I thought of this is on the music side, in terms of broadcasting unlicensed music to the internet, there are copyright issues there. And it's a good example of how the regulations haven't completely caught up with the technology. Now, what would happen periodically is if I played a very familiar record, maybe a major label record. Most of my stuff is not major label, so it's not an issue. But maybe once in a while I'd play something, and it would get flagged by bots that patrol the internet, and I would just get cut. I'd get bounced from the live stream, and what I'd have to do is restart. And the amazing thing is the audience would come right back online. They would just file right back up. And I kind of over the weeks took ownership of the whole challenge, in the sense of like saying, we're pirate radio, nothing can stop the music. The bots are going to try and shut us down and we'll come right back on the other side. So I kind of took ownership of it, and it became we're just making the best of the situation. But I would periodically get pulled off of the live stream. But that's a good example of how what's happening in this Wild West media landscape, whether it's sampling, like you mentioned, or just playing a radio station on Instagram. It's really a moving target, and no one's figured out how to control it. And you can't put the genie back in the bottle at this point. So everyone is sort of trying to play catch up. And it's only the cases where it's a big money property, a major label property, is when I would get pulled. For all the underground import stuff, never a problem. So that's a long way of answering your question about sampling. I think it's only when it's high stakes does it really matter.
Right. And that's why, I run basically a music interview show here. And I'm always educating my guests that it's embarrassing that I can't really play music, because I think the RIAA will do takedowns even on music that my own guests own themselves. So we've just stayed clear of it.
Well, there's a reason why 90% of the podcasts have music that sounds like terrible canned jingles. No one's sort of budgeted for it or can't do the required licensing, which makes perfect sense.
I'm proud to say our theme is an original and it's good. It's
There
good.
you go.
It ain't a jingle and it isn't happy necessarily. Uh, what would
That's right.
your year,
Travel.
I know you just became a new dad and everything, but what would your year without COVID look like? Would you have been doing a lot of live touring?
Maybe a little DJing. I think, the challenge for me coming out of the KCRW job was to have ownership and set the terms for my intellectual property. An extension of that is having kids and starting a family. That is real estate. That's your vested interest, right? But on the work and business and career side of things, similar. I started a record label and got reacquainted with that whole process. The label is called Secret Technology, and it's through a distributor called InGrooves. And the big learning curve there was understanding best practices in the digital space with DSPs, and how do you figure that out, and what's the ecosystem for that. And so I put out one single and a series of remixes. And that to me was just a great test case and exercise in figuring everything out and sort of setting things up for me to do more involved signings and more personal projects. So that's all in place. I think the big thing from this year was just really appreciating the value of one's creativity. So whether it's the story I was describing earlier of kind of finally forcing myself to learn a music production program and write something, it helped me appreciate that there is no creativity that should go to waste. Every little shred, every little thing that you do, if you believe in it and if you've created it, you know, bestow magic and value on that, and I don't know why it took me so long to figure that out, but it's something I would impart to everyone is like, it's funny because, in the art world, when you think about valuations of artwork and how they come up with those numbers, or even if you go to maybe a modern art museum and you're looking at something and you're like, this looks like some pencil scratch on a canvas, and well, I could probably do that. You could probably do that, but you don't. And you don't believe in yourself doing that, and you don't live it, and you don't bestow the magic upon it so that it is real and that you can create a valuation of it. So don't even say anything. You can criticize and you go, that looks like a piece of shit. I could do that. Well, yeah, but you don't. And, I think the lesson there is that in terms of expression and creativity, if you really believe in yourself and what you're doing, I think anything is possible, and don't let any of it go to waste. There are so many ideas, that threads of things that I've been holding on to for years and years and years. I can look at notebooks from, when I was a teenager, where there's ideas that I'm still kind of trying to make sense out of. And so I think it just speaks to the value of creativity, and if you can just appreciate that and respect that.
Yeah, that's a right on message right now with what's going on right now, and people should um, try their own creativity. I mean, this is what this is about. When I started this, I got a lot of grief. 1.7 million podcasts. What are you
Yeah,
starting a podcast for? It's like, because the people I want to talk to, a lot of people don't know who they are. And they've been amazing creative people, and people should know about them. And I want to have these conversations before it's too late in life. So
exactly. And you're just gonna do it. You have an idea, you have a vision, and you're just gonna do it.
what we do. So on your label, is the first single your own thing, or is it an
No,
artist that you have?
it's a friend of mine named Dennis White. His artist persona is Latroit, which is sort of a fusion of LA and Detroit. He's from Detroit. And it's funny because he sent me an unfinished demo to KCRW, which was an electronic cover of the Peter Gabriel and Kate Bush song "Don't Give Up" from So, the album So. and it was maybe 2 minutes, and I actually threw it on the air and played it, and it sounded great. He didn't expect that. He was just sending me this idea. So fast forward maybe 2.5, 3 years later, the pandemic hit, and I'm sitting around trying to figure out what to do with a label, or just building avenues for creativity. And I call him up and I'm like, that demo, did you ever finish that? Because that was a great idea. Can I do that? I'll just pick it up. Let's finish it. I can A&R this through. Let's finish it, and let's put it out. And it can be my first record on Secret Technology. So that's what it was, and it's been great. I will say that I would have, for the experience, it's been kind of a money pit, and I haven't figured out how to actually make money out of this yet. But I would pay for that experience, either in an art class or buying a work of art. I would spend $7,500 or however much money I'd put into the promotion and the artwork and everything. I would pay that much to have something physical, an object. So I feel very good about what we've done and what we've created. And we even did a music video. I just wanted to do it. It was funny because Dennis is like, "Are you sure you want to do a music video? Because let me show you. Go on YouTube." He's like, "Here's my last single, and I just did a lyric video where there's a single shot, and there's more people enjoying that, which no effort went into that. Are you sure you want to do?" And I was like, "Yeah, I just want to do it. I have an idea. I want to do it. Let's put a team together and make it happen." So, part of it is, it's funny because it's counterintuitive to think that this year has been, expressive instead of recessive. It hasn't been for me. It's been about growth. It's about expression in new ways. And that's been my answer to the challenge. And that's not to dismiss the hardships and the tragedies of the coronavirus. I know that a lot of people have suffered, but I will just say in my case that I've really experienced growth, both personally in life and family, stronger bonds with family, and having twin boys recently, but also in terms of creative spirit and expression.
Beautiful. That's beautiful. I love that. Do you have other people you're looking to sign, or are you kind of taking it one by one here and let's see where you get with this current?
Yeah, just one by one.
The
We'll
Detroit,
see.
how do you pronounce them? The Detroit? Le Detroit?
Detroit. Yeah, Detroit.
Detroit.
Yeah, I'll probably, he's got his own, career path, and he works on a few different labels. This was just a good opportunity, and to work with a friend and someone I admire. So, yeah, I mean, ears are open. I'm looking for other things, and I just want to feel so moved.
Absolutely. So is the show, when you're talking about doing the IG show on Instagram, on TV, IGTV, is that
Yeah,
Metropolis basically? I mean, is that what it is? Is it
it
on a
was.
set, it's a set time and day? And
It was.
it
Yeah.
was.
I think, the key there was just being consistent. I drilled home to the audience that Saturday nights at 8 o'clock, you could join me. And then I try and pre-promote through socials. And initially, it would bring in an audience of like 300 to 500 people. Once things kind of settled into a weird new normal, it would dip down to like 150, 200. But I don't take that for granted. It doesn't have to be thousands of people. The fact that there are 200 really engaged people is meaningful to me. So it was cool. When we got the all clear to go back to the KCRW studios, I wrapped up the live stream. So I haven't done it for the last 2 weeks. I'm thinking about trying to find a way to bring that aspect to the in studio radio show, just because it was so exciting and it unlocked all of these other cool things I didn't even anticipate. So I just want it to be great. So I also kind of feel like I hit the limit with Instagram Live. Um, I mentioned getting bounced off of the live stream periodically. A lot of people have told me about Twitch as an alternative. I think Twitch may have some agreements with the industry to be able to play music unregulated. Um, So I may sort of reset things and come back on Twitch as a live complement to the radio show in studio.
Well, that's great. Now that I'm back on social media, I'll happen to know what you're up to now. If I had known that was going on, I would have been there every Saturday night. So I had
It
no
was
idea.
fun. It was fun. My cat Bacchus would always get into the mix. People loved Bacchus.
That's awesome. So before we leave, I want to ask you kind of one last question, which, could take hours because you're such a curator of good music. But that is, what are you currently listening to that's great?
Well, let's see. I like the new Westerman album. He's an artist from the UK, and he really is picking up on some of that great 80s prog rock that we just don't seem to have anymore. Bands like The Police or Genesis, and I mentioned Peter Gabriel as an interesting inspiration for the record label. All that great 80s synth pop stuff, Tears for Fears and all that. I just I love that I'm hearing that from a young artist out of England. So again, his name is Westerman. Similar artist out of England called Bullion, as in gold bullion. He's doing cool things. Angel Olsen is on my top 5 albums of the year list for sure. She did a record produced by John Congleton, which is unbelievable, called All Mirrors. What else? You should have prepped me for this. I'd have a whole list for you. But some classic bands from the 90s electronic scene are resurgent, like Groove Armada, who are big in that sort of that 90s wave. They're back.
Back with new stuff, are you saying? Or is it just people are rediscovering them and they're more profiled?
Yeah. Hey, I will say, here's a good way to answer that is I have a Spotify playlist, and that is where I present the more song-based eclectic selections. And so, that's sort of an extension of The Morning Becomes Eclectic. Jason Bentley is this Spotify playlist. So the Metropolis side of me is just electronic mix, but on Spotify, I have a playlist called Jason Bentley's Music Room. Feel free to look it up. It has a really good engagement from the audience. I've been really impressed because I started the label. I was able to look at the back end of Spotify as a label. And so you can look at how many people are listening to your playlists and things like that. And I was so impressed with the engagement. Check that out for kind of the song-based things I'm into right now.
Right. Well, dude, I appreciate you making time. I love seeing your face. I'm so happy you're a father. It's amazing to me. And,
thanks, Nick. No, it's a pleasure to hear from you. So thank you.
I must know everything that you're doing. So please tell me how to keep up with you. I guess Instagram's the way. Yes.
Instagram is my native social habitat there these days. But feel free to reach out and drop me a note every once in a while. It's good to hear from you.
I will definitely do that. Thank you so much. You've been a wonderful friend, and I enjoyed our time when we were colleagues. And I'm happy to see you thriving and kind of really trying to get your head around creativity and being more creative. It's great.
Thanks, Nick.
All right, brother. Stay healthy.
All right, you too.
Well, that's our show this week. I hope you enjoyed it and maybe even learned a little something. To follow what's going on with this podcast, you can go to theradicalpod.com. Theradicalpod.com. You'll find show notes and past episodes, and even a little swag there if you want a t-shirt or a hat. Also, I would be honored if you'd subscribe at Apple or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. Till next week.